I will hear the question. Nigel.
Thank you. But within a couple of days, we'd learned of a third assassination attempt.
Well, I think people should be very concerned about reform because they're not just a threat to individual parties, but I actually think they're a threat to democracy because they are offering easy answers.
And in doing so, not just do the right thing, but maybe mend some fences between this government and the incoming presidency of Donald Trump's, given that the whole of his cabinet have been so rude about him over the last few years.
40%. That's the support Reform UK has garnered in some recent by-elections, according to former Labour Deputy PM Baroness Harman. It's a number that's sending shockwaves through the political establishment. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Now, Labour's considering cancelling local elections in key areas. Coincidence? Nigel Farage doesn't think so. He's calling it a desperate move to cling to power. But what's the real story behind these numbers? Baroness Harman's recent comments have sent ripples through the political landscape.
Harriet, it's not just the Tories who have to be worried. Mr Farage is after Labour seats as well, and I think the number now was they came second in 89 seats to Labour.
But he may have missed. I did congratulate the incoming president.
Which to real problems, which are not a solution and will just increase people's distrust and disillusionment.
The former Labour Deputy PM didn't mince words when she called Reform UK a threat to democracy. But what's really behind this bold statement? Labour's been facing some tough challenges lately. Their support in key areas has been slipping, and they're not shy about admitting it. Harman herself confessed that Reform UK has left Labour concerned after finishing second to them in a whopping 89 seats during last summer's general election. That's no small feat for a relatively new party. But here's where it gets interesting. While Labour's putting on a brave face in public, behind closed doors, they're sweating. Reform UK's surge in local by-elections has been nothing short of spectacular. We're talking up to 40% support in some areas, and that's from a standing start. Meanwhile, Labour's vote share in these contests has taken a nosedive. So, what's driving this shift? Political analysts point to a growing dissatisfaction with mainstream parties. Voters are feeling let down, especially when it comes to issues like immigration and public services. Labour's handling of these hot-button topics hasn't exactly won them any popularity contests. Reform UK, on the other hand, is tapping into this frustration and offering what some see as a fresh alternative. Farage's party is positioning itself as the new voice for the disillusioned. They're pushing policies that are striking a chord with voters, things like freezing non-essential immigration and promising tax cuts. It's a strategy that's clearly paying off, and Labour's starting to feel the heat. But here's the kicker. Labour officials, including Jim McMahon, have been hinting at a controversial move. They're actually considering cancelling local elections in areas where Reform UK is gaining momentum. It's a strategy that's raising eyebrows and questions about the state of democracy in Britain. This potential move by Labour opens up a whole can of worms. Is cancelling elections really the answer to political competition? What does this say about the faith Labour has in its own policies and voter appeal? And more importantly, what are the implications for British democracy if established parties start trying to change the rules when newcomers gain ground. While Labour frets over Reform UK's rising poll numbers, they might be missing a crucial point. The real threat to democracy might not be where they think it is. As we dig into Reform UK's key policies, a startling question emerges. Could Farage's party actually be championing democratic values more than the so-called mainstream? Nigel Farage isn't one to mince words, and his response to Labour's potential election cancellations was typically fiery. He likened the move to something you'd expect from third-world dictators, not an established British political party. It's a comparison that's sure to ruffle some feathers, but it's got people talking. Reform UK's policy positions stand in stark contrast to Labour's agenda. They're pushing for a freeze on non-essential immigration, significant cuts to income tax, and higher defence spending. One of their more eye-catching proposals is allowing workers to earn $20,000 before paying any income tax. They're also suggesting tax relief for those opting for private health insurance instead of the NHS. It's a radically different approach to Labour's more traditional left-wing policies. But here's where things get interesting. While Labour's accusing Reform UK of being a threat to democracy, Farage and his team are arguing the exact opposite. They claim they're offering voters a genuine choice, something they say is sorely lacking in British politics right now. Their Contract with You manifesto emphasises leaving the European Convention on Human Rights and stopping channel crossings. Love it or hate it, it's certainly a distinct policy platform. The potential cancellation of local elections raises serious questions about voter trust and engagement. Political experts are warning that such actions could lead to a significant breakdown of trust in the system. After all, if people start to believe that elections can be cancelled whenever the results might be unfavourable, what does that say about the state of our democracy? As we look towards the upcoming general election, this clash between Labour and Reform UK takes on even greater significance. It's not just about local councils anymore. It's about the future direction of the country. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has critiqued Reform UK's proposed tax cuts and spending increases, estimating they could cost nearly $140 billion a year combined. That's a number that's sure to spark intense debate. This conflict between the establishment and the newcomers could reshape the UK's political landscape in ways we can't yet predict. As voters, we're left with a crucial decision. Do we stick with the familiar, even if it means potentially limiting electoral choices? Or do we embrace new political movements, despite the economic uncertainties they might bring? The stakes couldn't be higher for both parties, and for the future of British democracy itself. The battle between Labour and Reform UK reveals a deeper struggle in British politics. It's not just about policy differences, it's about the very nature of democracy itself. Labour's panic over Reform UK's rising popularity has led them to consider drastic measures, like cancelling local elections. This move raises serious questions about the health of our political system. At the heart of this conflict is the issue of voter choice. Reform UK argues they're offering a genuine alternative to the established parties, while Labour sees them as a threat. But shouldn't voters have the right to decide for themselves? The potential cancellation of elections could erode public trust and damage the foundations of our democracy. As this political drama unfolds, it's crucial for voters to stay informed and engaged. Follow reputable news sources, tune in to political commentary channels, and participate in local community discussions about electoral changes. The future of British democracy may well depend on an active and informed citizenry. After all, It's not just about who wins the next election. It's about preserving the integrity of our democratic process for generations to come.